Good evening and welcome to the Franchise Tag Podcast with me, your host, Freddie Hall. Welcome Gareth, Johnny and James back for really the penultimate episode before myself, Gareth and Sky fly off to New Orleans for Super Bowl 59. We are dead excited. Obviously, Gareth is uber excited because his team, the Philadelphia Eagles, have made the Super Bowl and in a fantastic fashion as well. But we'll go through both the games tonight. So we're going to go through the Commanders and the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles game, and the Buffalo Bills game and the Kansas City Chiefs game. I'm sure you all had a very long weekend and a fun weekend of watching NFL, and it's been a really, really fantastic season, and it's all going to finish off in 2 weeks' time. Well, just under 2 weeks' time in New Orleans. We'll be there the whole time. We'll be doing Radio Row. We'll be everywhere and hopefully doing a lot of content for you guys. So keep watching us on YouTube and following on all our social media platforms as well. A repeat of Super Bowl not too far gone. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And we really, really can't wait. I fly, myself and Gareth both fly this Saturday. So yes, very, very excited indeed. We'll begin with the Eagles game though this evening. And the Philadelphia Eagles beating the Washington Commanders in the NFC Championship game 55-23. A staggering 21 points scored by the Eagles in the fourth quarter. I mean, it was a game that just got away from the Washington Commanders. But Gareth, I mean, you've watched the Eagles all season, and they've had one of the best players of the whole NFL season, Saquon Barkley. But what impressed you most about this Philadelphia win against the Commanders team? That it's getting there, you know, in terms of like experience and youth, and obviously rookie quarterback as well. But what impressed you most with this game?
I think it was what every team wants. It was a complete performance. It was where both the quarterback and the running back were on fire. The wide receivers were all amazing. You look at Dallas Goedert. I think what also was impressive that even though our O-line was banged up with absolute warriors on that O-line, I still don't know how Dickerson played the first half when he could barely walk. And then obviously Cam Jurgens coming in the second half to basically replace him because he was injured as well. I think it was just a complete nature. It was nice not seeing Jake Elliott make mistakes. Long field goal he missed, but anything above 50 yards you do take as can be a bit of a lottery. But it was just complete on all sides of the ball, offense, defense, and special teams. And that defense is an absolute monster. What is not to love about that young defense, whether it be Jalen Carter, whether it be the likes of those two cornerbacks who are so excited to watch. It's just a very, very bright time to be an Eagles fan right now, not just this year, but moving forward. It looks impressive.
Yeah, Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell both up for Defensive Rookie of the Year as well. And Jalen Carr, I think you missed out people like Nolan Smith on the edge, yeah. Jordan Davis. I mean, I know that was a few drafts ago now, but still young, still hungry. You've done exactly what a lot of people thought about the Eagles when they lost last time, was that like, right, how are we going to move forward? Like when they lost the Super Bowl against the Chiefs last time. I mean, it's Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham. I know these players are still playing for you, but it was like, right, how are they going to move forward without these veterans? But they had a corner and linebacker, and I know, Zach Bannon isn't a young guy, but he's really, for me, Defensive Player of the Year, and you filled in them corner spots, you filled in the defensive line, and you filled that offensive line with before the season even started, Jason Kelsey going, Cam Jurgens comes in, Landon Dixon's coming and filled in there. I mean, I worry for Dickerson. Hopefully, with it being over 2 weeks, just under 2 weeks off, he will recover well and be in that game, because you're going to need all that talent there. James, we had this last week when you were on the show, that we said about the turnover battle. The turnover battle is going to be the big thing in these playoffs, and it was so detrimental for a lot of teams in the games last weekend, and it was in this game as well. I mean, Jane Daniels, one interception, 2 fumbles by Eckler and De'Ami Brown, both recovered by the Eagles. The Eagles clean slate for the day. I mean, it's these margins, isn't it? It's these margins that get you to the greatest stage of them all.
Yeah, the further along you go into the season, you get into the playoffs, the difference between winning and losing is keeping control of the ball, keeping the ball safe when you've got your possessions. And the Eagles looked like the more experienced team on the night. I thought they knew when to make aggressive plays on offense and defense. You know, you look at the Zach Bourne punch out on Diarme Brown. You know, it's just, you know, a couple of different teams there with with different playing style and lack of experience and whatnot. You know, wouldn't necessarily have thought to have gone for that play there, but he's been doing it all year. You know, this Vic Fangio defense just knows what are the plays to make at the right times, when it needs a big play, when it can afford to not put so much pressure on the corners or the linebackers, or when to step up and when to sit deep. You know, they just look so complete. They are the number one defense for a reason. It felt like the Commanders had a youthful naivety to them. I know, like Eckler, for example, isn't exactly a young and experienced player, but there felt like a youthful naivety on that offense. And I don't know, from the different, I was trying to think of what the difference was between the game against the Lions and this game, and I'm just sort of wondering if they had the safety of the confines of the dome in Detroit, the safe conditions, and whether just, you could see it in the first quarter, there was must have been some sort of confetti or something go off in like a pre-game thing, because it was rolling across the field. You could see how fast just those like little bits of paper and stuff were just whipping across, and you thought, man, they're conditions that the Eagles are used to playing in. Washington, maybe not so much. And I don't know if that just played a factor, if it was the pressure of the occasion as well. I thought Jaden Daniels played okay. But we were talking before. One of the biggest difference was like the drive that the Commanders went on. The first drive just resulted in 3 points. It was a really long clock winding drive, but it only resulted in 3. And then the Eagles get the ball and just run it straight up the gut. One play, 7 points straight on the, or 6 points straight on the board. Converting afterwards, and it just felt like that really knocked the wind out of the Commanders, and they really struggled to recover from there. I look forward to seeing what they do in the off season. I think there's good foundations there, and I think Washington fans should be excited for what's to come. They just need a little bit more experience, a decent number 2 receiver behind with to pair up with McLaurin. I really like Zach Ertz, but a little bit more experience in that tight end room. Perhaps getting a little bit younger in that room wouldn't hurt either. But yeah, I mean, it was a shame it wasn't more of a competitive game. I'm sorry, Gareth doesn't necessarily agree, I'm sure. He's quite happy. It went fine. Yeah. But yeah, I think hoping for the best for the injuries for the Eagles guys on the line, especially just to make this the most competitive Super Bowl that it can be now.
I agree with many of your points, Johnny. I one of the big things that I felt like was that the Washington just weren't taking their moments at times, And I know that the 3 fumbles and 1 interception, it's hard to take the moments, but then when there was many key moments where they should have got points on the board or moved the ball down the field and progressed. And ultimately, then when you don't do that, you start chasing the game. I mean, they were matching them passing yards wise. Washington 251, Philadelphia 230, but on the ground, Washington 99 yards rushing. I mean, and then to 229 rushing yards by the Eagles, which is not, it's an absurd number. There was obviously 3 or 4 huge plays made by the Eagles running back room. But the problem is when you are chasing like that, the diversity of your game, it doesn't happen, does it? You then have to rely on Jane Daniels even more. And then Jane Daniels being a rookie, yes, we've been uber impressed with him out. Obviously, I said on the podcast last week, what a joy is to watch. And I feel like it was a joy in this game as well. He didn't look that phased at many times either in this game. I think it was just sort of the rubber agreement, and there was mistakes made that weren't his fault necessarily. We'll talk about sort of quarterbacks in the Bills-Chiefs game as well, because that's also something that I thought was quite obvious in that game as well. But Daniels, it doesn't help when you have to shift that mentality, is it, in the game when it starts going not your way.
No, absolutely. I think that the guys have touched on it already. I think the big difference in this game simply was quality. The Eagles are, we've picked up Jalen Daniels, and even though Jalen Hurts had a really good game on Sunday, I think majorities are feeling that Jalen Daniels is probably ahead of him in the pecking order of QBs, but everywhere else, I don't think the Commanders on paper, and on the field, are better than the Eagles, and that showed with, like you say, Daniels was, I think, for the first 10 plays, was throwing the ball. They struggled to get the run game going, and the first big play of the game, Saquon Barkley taking it to the house with the first possession from scrimmage. So I think that set the tone, and it's nothing to take away from the season, I don't think, for the Commanders. I think personally, I think they have at times they've had the rub of the green, and they've been lucky to get some of the victories, and that's just how it goes. I think I'm worried about the expectations on them for next year a bit already, because this is a team which is they're obviously rebuilding. This is the first year of that rebuild with a new head coach, a new ownership, new general manager, and their franchise quarterback. And if you look around the roster, there are centerpiece players like Daniels, McLaurin, Brian Robinson, Jonathan Allen, but a lot of the players elsewhere are experienced veterans who are on short-term deals, and they've got a lot of players who have contributed very heavily this year, who I think are out of contract in the off season. So the expectations on them to repeat this next year, I think, are a little bit premature. I think this is going to be a long process for the Commanders, and I think that was exemplified on Sunday against the Eagles. That the difference between the two sides is still quite extreme. The Commanders have obviously done really well. Huge upset against the Lions, which is will go down in their history as one of their biggest victories of all time, I'd expect. But to get back to this to this game again next year, or even in the next couple of years, I think is a big ask. But I think they obviously they're pointing in the right direction. This game came too soon for this rebuilding franchise. But the future's so bright with Jalen Daniels. If they can finally start to get their draft picks correct, because we know how poorly they except from Daniels, they have been at drafting players, then this will be a really good young team. Hopefully, they can bring some players back in the off season, and just continue on with what is a good foundation, and huge expectations, which I think unfortunately could be the detriment of them next year, but take nothing away from what has been a really good season for the Commanders.
The only thing I would probably push back on with that is that I think surely if you've been there this season, your other contract was coming up, or maybe you're a player going into this off season and going, I'm looking for a new team. I don't want to stay where I am. I think the Commanders becomes an incredibly attractive team to go to. With a young quarterback, you can get heavily paid there because of the low salary on the quarterback there. And like, I'm not saying they get all their guys back and then then some and go and win the NFC East, because I think Gareth, I think the Eagles, we're pretty sure they're going to be sort of champions of the NFC East for a while now, I feel like, anyway. But the Commanders will push them hard, I think. And I think we saw this with the Lions a couple of years ago. They didn't have a first grade season with Campbell, and it's slowly built. And they had some players in the building then who were really good at Lions, and they didn't keep them. They let them go, and they brought new guys in. Everyone thought it was crazy when Williams, the running back, went. And they were like, whoa, hang on, you and Montgomery and Williams were this incredible tandem. And then they went and drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, overdrafted him in a lot of people's eyes. Like, do you think the Commanders are going to be this team now that people are, they've been downtrodden for a lot of years. It's not been an attractive place to go. They traded everyone away. Remember, Montez Sweat, Chase Young was in the building. Sweat hasn't had the greatest time at the Bears. Chase Young's been bouncing around the league, and they were two players at the time for the Commanders in that defense when it was good last time, but were sort of their hallmark players. So do you agree with Johnny that this, maybe the expectation, maybe next year it may not happen again? Or do you think that actually this team's probably advertise themselves this year as a team that is going to be, competing every year for the NFC Championship?
For me, I think if you're a offensive player, if you're a wide receiver, a tight end coming up on the free agent market, there is one team I want to go to, and that is the Commanders, and that is due to the quarterback they've got. If they can protect him and look after him, and don't have what happened over at Houston, where literally the O-line doesn't exist, and so Stroud's been running for his life this year, like, it could be very special over there. And as much as we say that I expect the Eagles to win it next year, it's also the NFC East and no one repeats. So the Commanders could sneak it next year. The Eagles could have a Super Bowl hangover and all this kind of stuff. So you never say never. I think personally for me, I think that they're a team that are going to get a lot of people's interest. For one, they've got a head coach that you know what you get. He's a hell of a head coach. I think Cliff Kingsbury's kind of got past the reputation of being a great first half season coach with how the second half of the season's gone. Because I remember you saying earlier on the season, Freddie, that what is it with Cliff Kingsbury and first half of seasons? And then the second half, teams usually fall apart a little bit. So hopefully he's got rid of those ghosts of seasons past.
That was probably episode week 3 or 4 when they were going on, and we said, well, we've seen this program before where they've started. Yeah. He went on a huge unbeaten run with Arizona when he was the head coach there, and it culminated in them doing nothing, and we were all disappointed by it. And yet, you're completely right. He's held that mantle all year. He's been fantastic.
And I think it's just one of those things that I think as a team that I think they need to improve their running game. I think that was like in that game, how many times did they go, okay, we're going to run it now? And they just ran into a Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter wall and got a yard, which put them behind the sticks constantly. I think their aggressive play calling helps them. I think Dan Quinn, some of the play calling that was done in that game, like when they went for it. 2 fourth downs on that first drive that got them the 3 points. So I think as a team, they will be around. I think they're going to be a team that I expect to see in the playoffs next year. And I think they'll be a great place for free agents who want to go to. I think they're going to be the destination for a free agent this offseason.
I think just to hit on something that you mentioned before, because I was going to sort of bring up this as a counterpoint to Freddie's counterpoint. I don't want to get caught in sort of an infinite countering loop here. But, I think there is a sort of a team to look and be aware of, which is Houston, where I think we will have said this about Houston last off season. This is because of how CJ Stroud played the year before, looked super hot, looked, like a great prospect. They brought in some big names. Stephon Diggs obviously went there from Buffalo, and Joe Mixon came in, but they didn't build on the lines. And yesterday, the game for Washington, what you could just tell that their lines were weaker than the lines of Philadelphia. And Philly always just the last few years just build from the trenches, and then get younger in key positions, and so there is something there that I think they need to be aware of. It's fine filling out these glamour positions with big names and everything else, but if you can't protect Jaden Daniels, you're only going to end up in a Houston type position, where I know obviously they made the playoffs. The division is very favorable for them to be able to do so. But you're just going to hit a brick wall if you're not given enough protection. So hopefully they recognize that. And they can look at Philly as an example in division. It's really hard to replicate what Philly do. They make so many great decisions.
They're so individualistic in how they play.
Yeah, and it seems like such an easy thing to say. Well, you just build from the trenches and you build out. Like, why isn't every team doing that? Well, because there just aren't enough of these players for everybody to go around. And, you've got to look at the drafts and think, there has been some favourable fall-ins to Philly, like why other teams haven't taken, like how Jalen Carter fell a few years ago and whatever else. And it is crazy to think that these things do keep happening to them. But you've got to be in the position. You've got to know your guys. You've got to do your scouting. You've got to do your due diligence on these players. And then you've got to pick them when they're there, and they're so savvy and they know what they're doing. And so a lot of teams, especially the teams in that division, if the Commanders are going to want to make a push, they're going to have to look at this kind of Philly model, I think, and try and replicate it as best as they can, in order to be able to be competitive. You know, I think in the season, the two games that they played were competitive to a point. It wasn't anything like this week. But you see where strength in depth comes into play as well for Philly. You know, you were talking about the rotation on the line with Dickerson and Jurgens and whoever else. You know, Washington just don't have that if anything happens. So yeah, there's lessons to be learned from previous years with rookie quarterbacks and everything else. We always say that it's great to have a rookie QB. You know, you can use that rookie deal and everything else, and you pay these skill position guys. But if you can't protect, if you can't get better on the line, if you can't protect the quarterback, you're just not going to go anywhere. Philly know that better than anybody else. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they do. I think they've got a decent cap space. So yeah,
I think the other thing as well, though, is not every team has a Howie Roseman. Like that's the thing that I think is the key differential. I think that when you look at the roster that has been assembled there in Philadelphia, how many teams have the sheer volume of stars in every position imaginable? Like, and they do some smart stuff. Like, who thought a special teams outer linebacker could go on to be an inside linebacker absolute star? Who thought that Becton, who at the Jets seemed a bit of a bust, move him into guard, and he's had a hell of a year. They just seem to find these players that they remind me a little bit of like back in the day with the Patriots, how they used to find these players that people would discard, and then suddenly they turn into world beaters. And Howie Roseman is a very, very special general manager of which no other team can say they've got. And I think he is a differential to the Eagles. And the reason why we spend so much time in draft capital on the trenches is because we know we're going to pick up a player who's just going to magically slot in and do everything else. So I think that's where we are. And I think that's where the fortunate position we are in, that we have literally the best GM in football.
God, he's so smug.
We've got to go to New Orleans with him.
We're only jealous, to be fair.
Congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles and commiserations to the Washington Commanders. Like we said, maybe not your year this year, but we're definitely, for the most part, all believe that you've got something special going on over there in Washington. And I'm sure that makes a lot of Commanders fans very happy after the torrid time you've had for a very long time. Let's
stick it to Dan Snyder.
Say again, sorry.
Nice to just stick it to Dan Snyder just to see a little bit of success as soon as he's gone.
Yeah.
Let's turn our attention to the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship 32-29. A lot closer game, this one, Johnny. They sort of kept head and head for most of the game. The Chiefs were... I mean, the Chiefs at times, and the Bills were the Bills at times. I'm going to say that I am disappointed. I think a lot of fans are disappointed because I think not just that there is a general sort of Chiefs consensus hatred, or that no one wants them to three-peat, as they may well do in New Orleans, but the fact that Josh Allen, who's in the MVP race still for this season, and for the Bills, who are a team who have been really wonderful for the last 5 years, and still not been able to achieve the Super Bowl and get there. I mean, it must be tough on the fans because they feel like they're in the race every year. And, unfortunately, after this game, there's going to be the narratives of, Josh Allen, the Bills, they just can't quite do it. They just can't quite do it against Mahomes. They're never going to be able to do it against Mahomes in the AFC. What was your aspect of this game?
I think it was a blueprint Bills-Chiefs game, wasn't it, that we've seen in the postseason from the last, 5-6 years. The Bills had opportunities to win this game. And, what was frustrating, I think, at the start where, there didn't seem to be much of a game plan in, the first couple of possessions from Buffalo. Josh almost threw, I think, 3 interceptions in his first five throws, and the Chiefs were able to go on and build a bit of a lead. But as the game went on, the Bills showed why they, in many eyes were favourites for this game. James Cook has been absolutely insane. It's had an awesome game today. They've got pieces everywhere, but the juggernaut that the Chiefs is, they couldn't handle the intensity of Spagnuolo's blitz. Couldn't get players like Shakir into the game, and I think those sort of fine margins, coaching decisions, where the rulings on the field should have stood. I think ultimately it comes down to the fact that the Chiefs, I think, deserve to win the game because they are the better team. They're better run. They have the better quarterback. They have the better offense, defense, which is a shame because I was even though they are a divisional rival to me, I was rooting for the Bills because I think consensus-wise we want to see Josh Allen succeed because he is certainly one of my favourite players to watch, and they can't seem to get over the hurdle, and it's difficult to judge what needs to change. I was listening to a podcast on the Tube just earlier about and the Bills fans were calling for McDermott to be sacked. They felt that the decisions to go for the 2 points were in the third quarter and not kick the field goals. If you use your maths, the Bills on that last possession, they could have been level on points in that game, but they're obviously overreactions. I think the Bills have something special still, as a group. I think if we look back, I was thinking about thinking back to the start of this year, the players that they'd lost, they hadn't replaced Stephon Diggs, and there were question marks over the defense. I certainly came into this season with lower expectations of the Bills compared to some of the other AFC contenders. So maybe in looking back at that, has it been a good season? Can you consider this a success for the Bills? I'm not sure, but they just can't seem to get over the hurdle, and I don't know what the answer or the solution is, other than persuading Patrick and Josh Allen to change their teams maybe. But he seems to just be able to get one over the Bills every time, and whether or not it's deserved or not, I think fairly disappointed for the Bills, or at least someone different than the Chiefs. But they are the best team in football, and they showed that clearly last night.
I'm going to say it, and I haven't got the stats for it. I think this is all Josh Allen in the first half. I thought Josh Allen was really, really poor in the first half.
Yeah,
he was erratic.
I agree,
and I think that could be that Kansas City's defense was just being that good. But Gareth, I mean, that's you've got to have two good quarters. You've got to have two good halves. You've got to be clinical. Like, if you're going to read that, Jalen Hurts, there's a lot of criticism about his capabilities as quarterback, but he was clutch yesterday. He was very clutch, and Jane Daniels was clutch as well. Patrick Mahomes, the ultimate bannerman of clutch. Like, he is just so good at that. And Allen, I just felt, like Johnny said, straight off the bat, nearly 2 picks straight away. It was almost like the Bills were like, right, we're going to be aggressive from the start. Like, we are going, if we're going to beat the Chiefs, we're going to hammer them and we're going to embarrass them. And it was almost like, man, you need to pump the brakes here and do this very methodically if you're going to beat these guys. And I think there was, again, I agree with, there's some wrong play calls, there was some wrong times to run, and there was some wrong times to throw. It felt, I don't know, mate, did they beat themselves in a way?
I think there's an element of that, because when you look at, I'll give you a classic case of it, if you look at the final drives of kind of like both teams, like the Chiefs look calm, Mahomes looks calm back there, whereas the Bills just looked like they were rattled. They were like, oh my God. It's almost like the moment became too big for them in that point. And I think without that early turnover they got, I thought that there was a real risk of the Chiefs steamrolling them early, because there was that drive that obviously the Bills went 3 and out, and then the return drive back, the Chiefs just didn't look like they could be stopped. And then there was obviously they got their points, and then it was just, if it wasn't for that almost like the 2 fumbles, because it was more or less 2, wasn't it, in a row, the exact same play twice where there was a bad snap, you almost felt like the Chiefs could have steamrolled them early. And I would have worried what would have happened in that game if the Chiefs had had a 2-score lead in Arrowhead, in that stadium, with that noise, and particularly with the weight of history on the Chiefs side. And I know some people are going to say the refs as well, but we don't play that game. I just feel they beat themselves as much as there was some questionable calls. But no matter what goes on, there's always going to be a questionable. There's going to be calls you don't agree with. It just seems that they couldn't shake off the ghosts of playoff past.
Yeah, I'd agree. As I say, I brought that to the table. I thought Josh Allen the first half was not that great. I mean, Bills-wise, James, like Johnny said, sort of, I suppose Bill fans, ultimately the goal was to win the Super Bowl, and it has been for the last 2 years, and they failed, and they should see it as a disappointment. It's the failure of the season in some fans' minds. I mean, there was a few years ago, and we said they're not getting enough sacks. They need to get a great pass rusher. This team will go to the Super Bowl with it. Brought in Von Miller, went all the way there, didn't get to it. We went. They're relying on Josh's legs too much. They really need to invest in a running back. Probably get one in. James Cook isn't looking it. James Cook has now gone and hit. He has been fantastic. It was, they need to get a big time wide receiver. They've not got enough talent to wide receiver. They went and got Stephon Diggs. They brought in all this talent. But when we said year on year, this is the one thing. This is the one thing. Went all the way and then got knocked out and didn't make it and haven't won the Super Bowl. You then look at it this year where you went again. You went full. Well, not on Stephon Diggs, okay, Keon Coleman, but they that's what they're lacking. They're lacking the big time wide receiver. They go and trade for Amari Cooper just near the trade deadline. As a player that, for me, very underrated around the league. Hasn't made a big splash in Buffalo, but was a player that I think has been quite nice and fitting for Buffalo. I mean, what do they need to do? They've answered the question every time. What's the question this season?
I don't know. I think you need to send a priest or a shaman or all the above up to Buffalo and just get some voodoo out of there or something, because there's just some bad karma or something in there that just, I don't know, man. I don't know what it is, because like you say, we have questions every off season and they do seem to address them for the most part. I do think they've not got enough pass rush, and I think that's been a telling thing all season. At the trade deadline, I was surprised they didn't make extra moves there to try and enhance. Like you say, Von Miller hasn't quite been it since he's got there, but obviously he went there on a big contract and was, knocking on in years. It's just tough, isn't it? Because I don't know. And I hear the things about Sean McDermott and everything else, and he gets them this far, but he doesn't get them any further. And so do they maybe need a change, or is this just that going to Arrowhead is just so difficult? There are a couple of contentious calls. The Worthy catch that I don't think really, upon replay, I don't know how they got called a catch, really. That ball hits the ground and it's never really in his control. The one with Josh Allen, on the scramble where it gets overturned, the turnover on downs, it's these little things that are not in their control that sometimes turn the tide of these games. And so how do you overcome that? I mean, you can't really. There's nothing you can do there. They came out with this very aggressive game plan, and I think that was because when they played each other earlier in the season, that is what worked for them in Buffalo. They were really aggressive from the get-go, and it really seemed to rattle the Chiefs, and they just kept the pressure on, and it paid off, and they won that game up there in the regular season. That just didn't work today. And I mean, the other thing that I can't get my head around as well is, how is Steve Spagnuolo still the defensive coordinator at the Chiefs? Every good defensive coordinator that comes along, you look at Aaron Glenn this time, had a couple of good seasons in Detroit, he goes and gets himself a head coaching job. Steve Spagnuolo, he never even seems to really get talked about. He got a couple of mentions this time around, but he's just there all the time. Like, what have they got over him that means he can't go anywhere? They've got to have something, because he should, by NFL logic, that man should be a head coach somewhere else right now, but he isn't. And I think I don't know who it was today. I saw a quote from the end of the game. As long as we've got Spagnuolo, we've got a chance every time in these games, because he just knows how to dial up. And I think what had Josh Allen rattled was a lot of pressure early doors that he's just not used to facing, and it forced mistakes, and it forced him to look like the sort of rookie Josh Allen, very scattershot, sporadic throws, kind of silly mistakes that he hasn't been making in the regular season. it's just I don't know what Buffalo can do, short of trying to, I don't know, maybe pay Spagnuolo and get him in as your head coach or something, or I don't know, some kind of crazy move that they need to make to be able to turn the tide. I don't know if getting rid of McDermott is the answer, but I don't know what the answer is. It feels like they're just like, they are there. They're not a bad team. They are a good team. And in some ways they're better than Kansas City. But in the ways that matter, and at the moments that matter, they make mistakes and, like you say, sort of beat themselves. And it feels like it's the pressure until they win this game and they can sort of get rid of this voodoo curse that seems to be over them, that it's never going to change. And I don't know. There's a little bit of Chiefs frustration in there as well from my side, I think, because I just can't get over it. It's every time, every year. Oh my God. But it's frustration for the Bills as well, because they are good enough. They show it in a regular season when they win these games against the Chiefs and whoever else it might be. They are good enough. But in the big moments, they can't calm themselves, ground themselves, and make the right calls and make the right decisions, convert at the right times. You know, I don't know. It's really difficult. But the Chiefs are the Chiefs, and they play to their experience. And, you know, like we said about the Eagles, they look like the team that's been in this situation so many times before. Like, they know what to do. They just wait for the playoffs, man. Like we said, they were really boring all year, and they're just to put the playoff Chiefs
all season that they do not look good. They are playing for January. I mean, we said it about Travis Kelce. What was Travis Kelce's stat line in this game?
I think it was much.
19 yards. I mean, he's definitely in the Super Bowl going to go for like 6 receptions, 100 yards. We know this, or even against the Eagles. It might not be a winning Chiefs team, but he's going to have a big stat like that. I mean, Kareem Hunt. What's going on with Isaiah Pacheco, by the way?
Yeah, Kareem Hunt's so much better than Pacheco, isn't he? It's, the absolute rebirth of Kareem Hunt. It's quite nowhere really, but they have players. I don't know what it is about the culture of Kansas City. Obviously, they have, I think, you know, the best quarterback, you would say, in terms of consistency. I think obviously he's won X amount of rings so far, but
he's the second best quarterback of all time at this point.
Yeah, at this point, and you know, compare him to, you know, obviously Brady, and compare the Chiefs to the Patriots or the 70 Steelers or whoever. You know, the thing that they've got is time. You know, they haven't got there yet, but they have so much time to, you know, emulate themselves as the best franchise or the best, you know, dynasty of all time, which I suppose at the moment, the fans across the league is who are non-Chiefs fans and want someone else to go is quite, you know, annoying. But we are literally witnessing something I don't think we've ever seen before. And I think it starts with culture. I don't know what they have for breakfast in Kansas City, but they are just such a winning franchise. And I don't know what teams do to but I think that, you know, I just don't have the answer to beating the Chiefs, unfortunately, which is frustrating.
Well, the Eagles may do, and we know what they have for breakfast. Andy Reid has hamburgers, and there's some of the best barbecue in the world in Kansas City. James, Johnny, Gareth, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Thank you, everyone, for watching and or listening. Like we said, this is going to be our last episode of this style of show, I suppose, before we go over to America, to New Orleans, to be at the Super Bowl. Obviously, Andrew and Adam will be doing their bets and stuff still. The college show is also, I'm sure, ending. It will move into a more of a looking towards the draft style show. That is all to be confirmed after we do all the Super Bowl and just after Super Bowl as well. But like I said, we are going to be in New Orleans. If there's anyone watching or listening who is also going to be in New Orleans, please give us a hit up. We would love to meet you, love to chat to you. Look, we love to talk to anyone, you know, as we're very friendly people. And we are also always looking for guests to come on the podcast while we're there as well. until then, thank you again for watching. Make sure you follow us all on YouTube and on our social media platforms to catch us in New Orleans. We'll see you all again very soon, and have a great rest of your week.